When Marvel was at its peak, it was the unstoppable force in entertainment, with movies breaking records and becoming cultural phenomenons. But what if I told you that this same company once filed for bankruptcy, that it hit such a low that many thought it was done for? Marvel's journey is one of epic highs and crushing lows, and somehow, against all odds, it rose again to become bigger than ever. But how exactly did this happen? Marvel started out long before the cinematic universe we all know today. Back in the late 1930s, comics were starting to gain popularity, and superheroes were just entering the scene. This was the year when Martin Goodman decided to step into the comic scene. During this time, he launched Marvel Comics #1, featuring the Human Torch and the Submariner. The issue was a commercial success and was sold out, marking what would be the beginning of success for Marvel right from the first attempt. From there, Marvel, which was known as Timely Productions at that time, introduced various superheroes. In 1941, Captain America got his first debut. It was the perfect time for such a character to be released as the cover of the comic, since it was launched just a few months before America joined World War II. And it showed Cap punching Hitler, which was very bold at the time. Captain America's name was becoming larger than Marvel itself. The growing popularity of Captain America only expanded Marvel's image, and with this, the comic saw extreme popularity as it provided hope, not only to soldiers, but also to civilians during the war. But as we all know, nothing lasts forever. With the end of the Second World War, the comic superhero trend had come to pass. The audience was no longer interested in news stories about superheroes. In a flash, sales of Captain America and other heroes fell down. There was a huge strain on Marvel because it maximized its profit during the war, so once it was all over, they weren't able to adjust quickly enough. Sales crashed, and superheroes were not super anymore. Marvel had to change its strategy and do it fast, so they pulled back from superheroes and explored other categories: romance, western, sci-fi, and in a nutshell, Marvel literally threw every genre out there to see which worked best with viewership. And for some time, this plan succeeded. They managed to discover new demographics and hold on for dear life during this period of content expansion. But the turning point arrived too soon. In the early 1950s, new challenges for the comic industry emerged. One of them was none other than the Comic Authority Code. This association was founded as a reaction and protests from parents complaining that comics were damaging the youngsters. Some people connected comics with street crime and the loss of morals. In fact, Congress was joining in, and it seemed that the federal authorities were going to intervene in the regulation of the comic book business. In a bid to avoid government regulation, comic book companies, among them Marvel, pledged self-regulation. This produced the Comics Code, which laid down the specific boundaries of what could be shown in comics. Violence had to be toned down, the content had to be suitable for the entire family, and as a consequence, many comics turned out to be, well, boring. They became dull, and the readers soon grew tired of them. This was the beginning of Marvel's first major collapse. It used to be a multimedia company that was unable to cope with these norms, and of course, sales dropped rapidly. It seemed like Marvel was losing its grip. Then came Stan Lee. If you have even a slight interest in Marvel, there's no way you don't know Stan Lee's name. However, in the 1940s, Stan was just some kid who worked at Timely Productions. Gradually, he climbed the ranks and eventually became the face of Marvel Comics. In 1961, Stan Lee and artist Jack Kirby took a risky route. They formed the Fantastic Four, a group of superheroes that had never been constructed before. What made these characters stand out was their flaws. They fought with each other, they were self-doubting, and had real-world problems. It was a fundamental change from the almost omnipotent, idealized heroes of the past. These characters were relatable, and therefore, they were popular. Following the success of the Fantastic Four, Lee and his team introduced some new heroes: Spider-Man, the X-Men, the Incredible Hulk, and many more. Marvel finally embraced its name, branding itself officially as Marvel Comics. The comic book universe that we know today started taking shape, and once again, Marvel was riding high. But then followed the 90s, and again, the cycle of rise and fall. In the early 90s, Marvel was doing fine. Sales of comic books were booming, and at one point, Marvel was ranked among the top players in the industry. But there was an issue. Fans were no longer investing in comic books for leisure reading. They were now purchasing them as collector's items. Comic books became overvalued over time. A lot of individuals were purchasing issues, believing they would be worth a lot of money in 10 or 20 years' time. But as with any bubble, this one was bound to burst. And when it did, Marvel took a huge hit. All the comic books that were being hoarded for decades suddenly became basically worthless. And Marvel, which had practically depended on this sort of market, saw its sales dive in no time. The company hit rock bottom in 1996 when it declared bankruptcy. Now, think about that for a moment. This was the same company that had brought us Spider-Man and the X-Men that now stood at the brink of total collapse. So, up to this point, it would be safe to say that the outlook for Marvel was quite grim. But just like in any good superhero story, this was not the end. Marvel's next move would change the entertainment industry forever. After years of licensing out its characters to other studios, such as Sony for Spider-Man or Fox for the X-Men, Marvel said it was time to take matters into their own hands. Thus, in 2005, Marvel Studios was born. They went all in and put all of their ambitions into the creation of their own movies. In 2008, they released the first film under their business model called Iron Man. And we all know how that turned out. Iron Man was a smashing hit and did ignite the dawn of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Marvel Universe, and Robert Downey Jr. era. As it turned out, Marvel had cracked the code. The triumph of Iron Man was a catalyst for Marvel Universe and its films, which consequently went on to conquer the box office in the subsequent decade. With hit after hit, The Avengers, Captain America, and Guardians of the Galaxy, Marvel was a force to be reckoned with. They were no longer just a comic book company. They were an entertainment empire. In 2009, Disney noticed the potential in Marvel and bought the company for $4 billion. Some insiders thought Disney overpaid at that time. But looking back, it's clear Disney made one of the smartest investments in entertainment history. Forward to 2019, and Marvel had reached an all-new level of success. Avengers: Endgame became the highest-grossing film in history with over $2.7 billion in ticket sales worldwide. Marvel's characters had now gone from being relatively unknown to everyone knowing them, and their movies were not simply profitable, but rather a big deal in pop culture. Even with this huge achievement, there are obstacles that Marvel had to overcome. Superhero fatigue has been growing for some fans in the past few years, and the Marvel Universe has the challenge of correlating their hits with the competition. After Endgame, numerous people asked how Marvel could film more movies. The film industry was severely impacted due to the pandemic, which led to numerous hiccups and reconstruction of the old ways for Marvel. But if Marvel's past teaches us anything, it is that they are tough. From declaring themselves bankrupt to being the largest film franchise in the world, they have shown again and again that they can recover. So, what can we take from Marvel's journey? Whether it was shifting focus from comics to movies, or launching entirely new characters and storylines, Marvel has always managed to adapt and stay relevant. Now, as we enter a new phase in the Marvel Universe, there are questions about what the future holds. Will they continue to dominate the box office with new heroes like Shang-Chi and the Eternals? Or will they face another fall as audiences shift their attention elsewhere? One thing is for sure. Marvel has built an empire that isn't going away anytime soon. And just like their most famous characters, they'll always find a way to come back stronger. So, what do you think? Will Marvel continue to break records and shape the future of entertainment, or is another fall on the horizon? Let us know in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about companies that turned their failures into success, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.